Hello, today I would like to talk with you about Apple and the fact that there might be two Apples, a Chinese Apple and the rest of the world Apple. Now, in China, since November, more or less, all around major cities, protests are going on. And the sparkling was an accident in a building in a far province, Xinjiang, where essentially the people within this building, maybe there was just a very specific apartment, died due to a fire. And the firefighters cannot really access the building because it was subject to quarantine. And the people within the building could not leave the building because the building was sealed, literally physically sealed. This is how Chinese local authorities apply in Let's the concept of a lockdown and a quarantine. Chinese people have been going out and in lockdowns for the last 3 years, and this caused a sparking in the unemployment rate. So a lot of issues, and even for them, this was quite a very hard restriction over their personal freedom of movement. For example, the fact that every year before COVID, 200 million Chinese could leave China for just to be tourists, and then they cannot do that. So having said all of that, we have those protests going on for the last month. And of course, you know that there is a very strong censorship, so you cannot just, organize yourself, send out contents and so on to everybody else using WeChat. AirDrop started playing a role here, and the fact that if you opt in to receive contents from strangers, these features, it's just always active. And you might be accidentally exposed to someone else sending you contents through AirDrop. And the cool thing is that AirDrop, it's a communication based on Bluetooth from one iPhone to the other. No internet involved. So you're just walking down the street and boom, you receive something. You look at your phone. It might be, a video, a flyer, a picture, whatever. The CCP, of course, didn't like that and asked Apple to immediately stop or prevent users from doing that. And of course, Apple immediately applied a fix, changing the way this opt-in works. So you can still opt in to receive contents from strangers, but this functionality stays on for just 10 minutes, making visually impossible for you to be accidentally exposed to this kind of content. So you start seeing that when it comes to Apple and the Chinese authority, Apple tend to be very compliant. Sometimes, not sometimes. When it comes to, for example, the Apple Store, it's very, very proactive. So since 2017, roughly 55,000 applications just disappear from the Chinese Apple Store because they violated the terms and conditions. And violating those terms might be just, having a reference to the Dalai Lama or Tibet or Tiananmen Square or whatever. So there is a team which is, responsible, like everybody, like in every other place on Earth, but especially in China, to check the quality of the apps, but in that case, the quality of the apps is really also not about censorship. So it's security, is the quality of the app itself, but they must also comply with a very strict censorship policies. And they do that proactively. There is no formal request from the CCP. Then, privacy. Here is the catch. Apple had to store all the users' data, the Chinese user data, on Chinese servers. Okay. But then who's the owner of those data? It's a Chinese company. Just for short, it's called GCBD, sorry for the very bad pronunciation, Guizhou-Cloud Big Data. And this company, which is a private company, owns those data. And now when the CCP, so let's say the central government, the central authorities, wants to access the users' data, they just ask to this company the access to them. So formally speaking, legally speaking, Apple has nothing to do with this kind of access. But, you know, it's really like hiding behind a finger. So I'm Apple, I'm saying, no, I don't have anything to do with exposing my users' data with the CCP. I just have a relationship, an agreement with this company. And then this company, not even behind the scenes, exposes all the user data to the CCP. Interesting. And this is, you know, the Chinese situation. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that China is just a little bit important for Apple, because Apple assembles nearly all its products in China. The iPhone, iPad, and so on. Yeah, maybe some Macs are assembled and produced in the States, but you know, the bulk really comes from China. And when we think of the sales, one fifth of the world sales are generated in China. So maybe the CCP has a say when it comes to what Apple is allowed or not to do. And then, let's switch to the Western version of Apple. In the West, Apple is really about privacy. We are not like Facebook, Meta. We sell devices. We are not interested in your data. So there was this fact with the mass shooting in San Bernardino when FBI asked Apple to create a special version of the iOS, so the operating system, to access the iPhone of one of the killers. And Apple really refused in this case, but like in many others, referring to the All Rights Act of 1789. And they did that, you know, with success, because in the end, the FBI could access that iPhone using another company and withdraw the request to Apple. So Apple, you know, really made the point. We are not here to sell or to expose our user data. We don't want to give you, you know, general tools. It might be super specific. And dear FBI, you're asking us to give you the keys to potentially, in theory, a bunch of iPhones. And we really want to stand for something that is important: privacy. So here in the West, Apple has a very pristine brand. Everything is elegant, perfect, sophisticated, and of course the civil rights. They are really ambassadors of them. Okay, which, by the way, of course I have nothing against the human rights, but I just want to highlight that it really depends on the context where you are. So Apple is really about those rights here in the West, in the States, but then when it comes to China, those principles tend to be a little bit shaky. And then there was this thing with Elon Musk. So Elon Musk tried to play it quite dirty, essentially saying, "Dear Apple, you are against free speech because first, you are not willing to continue investing $100 million every year in advertising on Twitter. And by the way, this represents more or less 9 to 10% of the world revenues of the current Twitter. So it's a lot. And dear Apple, you are threatening us, Twitter, to remove the app from the App Store. So that's why you're against free speech." And Elon made that in a way so that he could really trigger let's call it the MAGA wave. So all those guys that really want to have a very explicit and sometimes violent speaking And this is, of course, something that Apple doesn't really like in the West. So the ability of Elon was to force Apple into the mud, fighting against those, or having the brand involved in conversations made up by those really extreme guys willing to say a lot of questionable stuff on Twitter. So then Tim Cook invited Elon Musk at the Apple campus in California. And after some time, Elon reported that the situation was now fine, no problems at all. It was a very good conversation that he had with Tim Cook. And then, last but not least, let's consider the moment when, not the moment, it's just a tendency, it's a trend. The US understood that they are too dependent on China, and they want to reduce that, and this thing is called decoupling. So they want to be more independent when it comes to production, and in general the supply chain, those must be shortened, especially when it came to the Trump's administration. Now Apple could really resist against all of that, so selling in the States, being considered a very prestigious American company known for innovation, human rights, and so on. But at the same time, they kept producing, they kept assembling in China and selling a bunch of iPhones and other stuff in China amid this decoupling war. So having said all of that, probably Tim Cook, who's for sure a great CEO, probably he's a great politician. So if you start looking at him as a politician, you really see the miracle, the ability, to say one thing and the opposite at the same time, but using different words, speaking to different audiences. So he's really always, he can really always fit to the context, which politicians are really masters at doing. Thanks for watching. Take care. Cheers.